Black Americans today are treated just as equal as the white bunch, but this wasn't always the case. America, hitherto 1960, was purgatory for blacks. To fight this injustice came ahead a Baptist minister from Georgia and gave a speech in 1963 that shook racism to its foundations.
Years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
The 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 during the American Civil War. Actually, the Civil War had started in 1861 because of the government's idea to free all the slaves. This was how much the blacks were hated by the whites.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned.
Well, the hunger's ugly where souls are forgotten, where black is the color and none is the number.
Up an empty cup I ask silently.
It's a hard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard rains are gonna fall.
That is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
The imperative thing about King's movement was that it was a non-violent movement. He believed that the blacks couldn't succeed in their struggle without the support of the white community. Martin Luther King was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, both of whom were preachers of non-violence, got worldwide recognition when their peaceful struggles yielded fruit.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
There had been some dog biting, some beating, some killing. Many people were beaten and spit on and put in jail, lost jobs. But those were minor things compared to what we felt we had to do.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Attention to the evil situation to
of their adult lives. In the van is Martin Luther King, who has been jailed 12 times on racial issues.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream.
If you're black, you might as well not show up on the streets unless you want to draw the heat.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
The Ku Klux Klan was a group of white racists that could go to any lengths to ensure the blacks went free. They tortured and killed the Negroes all over the country to express their hatred.
Mrs. Sybil Jones, Ladies EC of Unit 1. Give her a hand if you will.
We need good women that's ready, willing, and able to stand up not only for their children, but all the children in America. They told me that my daughter had to sit in a classroom surrounded by Negroes. But let me tell you, my child is not sitting surrounded by Negroes, and she will not be the next time you ask until they put this 100 pounds 6 feet under. You can better believe that I'll be up fighting for my child. I'll never give up. How about you? Thank you.
when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
5 years after giving his famous speech, King was shot dead in Memphis. He might have died, but his movement started a flame that would go on to consume racism and give African Americans the freedom they needed. As a result of civil rights movement, the government was forced to abjure the very concept of racism, and the whites welcomed their Negro counterparts with open arms. Racism exists in America even today, but in comparison to the earlier days, this is nothing. And if more people are willing to change their thoughts and beliefs, racism can be eradicated completely. And at last, let freedom be your religion, let peace be your doctrine, and let brotherhood be your way of life.
Deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome some.